India, in a way, during elections, I've discovered new aspects. So it's not just about the politicians, but it's also about the people. Because the fact is, it was the most one-sided narrative in the history of Indian elections in terms of the media's role. I certainly was, I must confess, worried that I would be arrested for sedition. Modi and I have followed each other over the last several decades, and what started off as one book has ended up in a trilogy. It's not as if the Congress didn't misuse the CBI. Of course the Congress misused agencies. The BJP is doing the same, only more brazenly. Both are wrong. The joy of holding a book in hand beats probably anything else in journalism, apart from the...
Hello and welcome to Harper Podcast. I'm your host, Amrita Tripathi. On this podcast, we talk to writers about their big books, their big ideas, and how those ideas can possibly change the world. Today, I'm delighted to be in conversation with Rajdeep Sardesai, my former boss, of course, which I have to give as a disclaimer, sir.
Thank you very much, Amrita. Great to be with you.
And we're here to talk to you about your new book, 2024, The Election That Surprised India. For those of you who don't know Rajdeep, he's an author, he's a consulting editor and anchor of India Today Television. He was the editor-in-chief of CNN-IBN, the news channel that used to be, which is where we crossed paths first, almost 20 years ago.
That's right. Yeah. In fact, almost 20. That's right.
So I want to ask you, Rajdeep, we've always known you as someone who's very obsessed with elections, with politics. You love the big political tamasha every time elections come around. Talk to us a little bit about that. What is it about this democratic exercise in India that excites you so much?
Amrita, it goes back a very long way. I just remember as a kid, and for reasons that I still can't really fathom, rushing to the USIS building in Mumbai, where I grew up, to watch on some TV kind of set. I say some TV kind of set because I'm not sure whether it was a TV screen or a film screen, a US presidential election between Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter. And I wanted Carter to win for, again, reasons that I can't explain now. But I thought peanut farmer versus this Republican, and I was a Democrat in a way, even at the age of 11. So I wanted Carter to win. And then I remember 1977 when Indira Gandhi lost, rushing to my door to take that newspaper and rushing to my mom and dad and saying, Indira Gandhi's lost, Indira Gandhi's lost. You know, I think there is something to celebrate about democracy, the winners and the losers. The fact that the people of a democracy get a chance to elect their leaders, I think is truly, in a way, almost liberating. Because think of someone who's a day laborer and a billionaire businessman having to stand in the same queue possibly to cast a vote. That's the one time, the only time that there is some equalization between that billionaire and the daily wage laborer. And I just think it's great that I have the same power as a daily wage laborer as an Ambani or an Adani has. And, why not? Yeah. And I think that's where it comes, that's why I relish elections. It gives me a chance to explore this country like very little else does. And every time I go into India, in a way, during elections, I've discovered new aspects. So it's not just about the politicians, but it's also about the people.
So this is your third book on elections, 2024. This was not intended as a trilogy, you said. You thought you were going to write the one book when 2014 happened?
That's right. I left CNN-IBN or Network 18, and, it was traumatic at that time. We won't go into that. But how do I it was almost cathartic to write a book because it gave me a sense of what I wanted to do at that moment. I was engrossed in it. Narendra Modi had just won an election. The first time the BJP had got a majority in the country. It was a historic landmark election. And growing up, I thought all these elections that I followed, there wasn't enough written on them. The great 77 election, there was probably just one or two books at best written in those times. So I wanted to tell the world about this new rising political figure called Narendra Modi. So it starts off there, and Modi and I have followed each other over the last several decades, and what started off as one book has ended up in a trilogy because I think politics in this country has changed dramatically in the last decade in an unimaginable manner. It's far more bruising and polarizing. Perhaps less of a festival of democracy than it used to be in the 90s when I first covered elections. There were the auto rickshaws with their loudspeakers, lots of color and festivity. you still get the odd experience of that in states like Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, particularly down south. But generally, it's much more bruising, polarizing, lots of scheming and back-end maneuvers. And I think people need to recognize what's happening so that maybe 20 years from now, we can look back at this decade and just say, wow, that happened.
It's the first draft of history, right? Which we haven't seen as much of articulated.
And I think, Amrita, particularly, you've been on television as well. Television and social media. I mean, social media reduces everything to 250 characters. Television to a soundbite. I mean, we need to go beyond that and look at the complexities, explore the characters. They're all fascinating characters, these politicians. The other day, I called a politician a friend, and instantly I was trolled on social media. I mean, it's not a friend in terms of having to invite them for dinner home, but it's just in terms of getting an access into their world. How do they connect with so many thousands of people? So I think a book is able to do what social media never can and what TV also can't. It can give context, and it can, enable you to visualize almost the world around you.
Many things to unpack in that, including social media and trolling, because Rajdeep is not a stranger to trolling, I might say.
Not at all. Not at all.
I'm expecting that rub-off effect, so I'm bracing for that.
Yeah.
But surprisingly, though, given the way the entire political milieu has changed, the way journalism has changed, and you talk about this in the book, and we'll come to that in this chat as well, I was surprised to read this. You say, I remain a cheery optimist, which is perhaps the chief reason why I have been reporting on Indian elections for 35 years and may often appear over-enthusiastic in the TV studio on counting day. This is the 10th general election I've reported on. So I'm guessing the over-enthusiasm is because you danced a couple of times on results day in a new avatar of yours, but you are you consider yourself an optimist?
Yeah, the dancing part is deeply embarrassing, and you can say is driven by TRPs. But yes, I remain a cheery optimist because this is the most diverse and wonderful country in the world. I saw it the other day. There was an election in Haryana. At 9 a.m. in the morning, there were laddus and churma and dholak at the Congress headquarters because the Congress thought it was winning. An hour later, complete silence. And the BJP was having the laddus because the BJP was winning. I mean, this is incredible. And you could have an election in Haryana where that happens. Tomorrow you could have an election in Maharashtra where just the reverse happens, or any other part of the country. Every state, every constituency is distinct. And I think the 2024 elections in particular showed the remarkable diversity of this country. Odisha, your home state, voted one way, and Bengal, neighboring, voted completely differently. Andhra Pradesh votes one way, Telangana the next. The Gujarat one way, Maharashtra the next, Delhi votes one way, and Punjab very differently. So, this is the most amazingly diverse country. That's what really excites me, frankly, about elections and why I remain an optimist. I know which other country is so uniquely aspirational and diverse at the same time. In the Haryana elections, I interviewed Vinesh Phogat this time. Think about it. One day you're competing for the Olympic gold medal, all that craziness over a disqualification. Next moment, you're in a room full of 100 Jat men. There wasn't a single woman. There's Vinesh and me. And all these guys are wanting to have a slice of, the action and trying to sort of shake her hands, bless her. It was just surreal almost. Where else will you find that anywhere in the world? Where a woman wrestler, Olympic woman wrestler, is controlling 100 burly Jat men. I thought it was fantastic.
And that does come across in your writing. I think, as you said, it's such a different medium, writing a book to social media to TV. But what really comes across, and I think, probably relying also on my knowledge of you and seeing you over the years, you seem to really come into your own, of course around election season, but when you're meeting people, when you're telling stories. So do you think fundamentally at the heart of all this, whether it's cricket, whether it's politics, whether it's meeting voters across the country, do you think it's the connection with people and storytelling that's your jam, as it were?
Well, I don't know whether it's the jam. It's probably bread and butter as well. But it is. I do a show. I've been doing a show called Elections on My Plate, where I get to eat the wonderful cuisine of this country. And just over those lunches or dinners or breakfasts, you just meet a wide variety of people. Yes, the book is about storytelling. It's narrative driven. There are lots of academics who will write about Modi and Rahul Gandhi. And Rahul Gandhi is one of the standout figures this time in this election particularly. They'll write the academia. and go into the deep ideological fault lines. I've tried to tell a story. I believe journalists are ultimately, as you said, the first draft of history, and we should be telling the stories of our times. And these are exciting times to tell these stories about. The battle in a way between Rahul Gandhi and, dare I say, Gautam Bhai or Gautam Adani, or indeed the role of the enforcement directorate in our politics. All of this needs to be told, I think, in a narrative format, because that's the only way, or the NDTV takeover, so that in a narrative format, so that a reader can start sort of getting involved in the characters, even if he or she is not obsessed with politics. I hope the politically obsessed people will read it, but I also hope, more importantly, those who just want to understand what's happening around them will also read it.
And I think it was interesting is because you have this, the kind of perspective which you say, this election was unlike any other, which we've seen in your reporting as well. But here, not only are you talking about the political leaders, but you do these 10 stories of hope. Take us through that.
I think the 10 stories of hope, which I wrote as one of the last chapters of the book, is again to reflect the optimism. I mean, think about it. There is this young tribal on a bike with a gang of bikers at the age of 31, Rajkumar Roat in Baswada in Rajasthan, who takes on a minister who's been in power for several decades and wins the election. Or take Sanjana Jatav, a 26-year-old Dalit mother of two, takes on the mighty BJP machine in Bharatpur and wins an election. Or indeed an engineer Rashid from Jammu and Kashmir wins an election from jail. Or we've got a doctor from Bangalore, son-in-law of Deva Gowda, who is a celebrated cardiologist, but then takes on DK Shiv Kumar's sort of strongman brother and wins. Or the so-called clerk of the Gandhi family, who takes on the charismatic Smriti Irani and wins from Amethi. Or Chandrasekhar Azad Ravan, another sort of Dalit leader who says that his obsession as a kid was to become the next Sachin Tendulkar. These are all great stories. And these are stories that need to be told again. For those who think that politics is only about these sort of top politicians, the big leaders, there are all these leaders also who matter. And matter just as much, because they're also winning Lok Sabha elections, and not easy. Some of them, like Geniben in Gujarat, the only Congress candidate to win in Gujarat, almost won her entire campaign by crowdsourcing. You don't need billions of dollars then to win. So I think all these stories just, excite me. And as I said, again, it's the narrative format to tell stories.
Rajdeep, you're also someone who's always been clear that you don't think the journalist should be the story. And yet the way things have changed, you often find yourself, either in the sort of crosshairs on social media or in the, crosshairs of a political party. You've been accused of many things, which we're not going to get into here. How do you take that and, sort of set that aside while you're trying to do a fair job of reporting or a book like this?
The fact is, I don't want to be the story. But in the media chapter, for example, I speak about how sedition charges were filed against me during the Republic Day farmers' agitation. It became a major controversy, and I try and tell the story as honestly as possible and admit to mistakes, errors that I might have made, because I think one should be, when writing a book, you've got to let it out there. I must be honest with you, Amrita, particularly the media chapter. Initially, I said, can I write about my own tribe? And how honest can I be? And I said, I would be dishonest if I didn't write about the media's role in influencing the election narrative. Because the fact is, it was the most one-sided narrative in the history of Indian elections in terms of the media's role. So you've got to write about it. And even if that means to some extent you are part of the story, because I'm not claiming that I'm out of the media and I'm sitting on a pulpit and it's my colleagues who are doing it. We're all part of it. We're all part of a system which has become hyper-partisan and toxic at one level. The role of social media in particular, you mentioned earlier trolling. I get trolled. And I didn't join journalism to get trolled every day. I was happy with letters to the editor that used to be written when I was in print.
A civilized time.
Yeah, it was a civilized time. But, if you can't stand the heat, then you've got to get out of the kitchen. So it comes with the territory. But, we live in these times where even social media is a player during elections. Politicians are increasingly on Twitter, Facebook, setting the agenda, Instagram. Everybody's on Instagram. And that's also changed the nature of politics. So how can you not write about yourself in a way as a practitioner of the media when you want to expose the media's role during elections?
And we'll talk about the credibility crisis of mainstream media, as you put it. There's, widely, globally, there's a trust deficit now in the media. It's not just an India problem, but we're seeing a lot of that play out here. You talked about this chapter when, there were these rumors that you're going to be arrested and charged with sedition. And I thought it was very moving, actually, because Sagarika, the first author in this household.
Yes, she's and the writer, and the writer. She's the writer. I'm the chronicler.
I think, and so she at one point, you say, tells you, please don't grandstand, which is really funny. It sounds exactly like Sagarika to you, but she's telling you, don't grandstand, take this seriously. Your daughter, who's a lawyer, Tarini, also saying you can't take any chances, and you actually listen to them. So for a minute, you're actually worried that you're going to get arrested and listening to their concern for you.
I certainly was, I must confess, worried that I would be arrested for sedition. I have no problem being arrested if I've committed a wrong. But to arrest me for sedition, the charges are still there in the Supreme Court, not just against me, in the same case against the likes of Shashi Tharoor, Mrinal Pandey and others. And it took me time to process it. And eventually I said, okay, I'm not going to, my first reaction was I'm going to confront the system. Yeah. And maybe one day I still will. But then better sense prevailed. But I forget about me, I have protection. Think about the hundreds of other journalists or activists. So, a Disha Ravi, whose case I mentioned, a climate change activist who's picked up, put into jail, a young 20-something girl only because she sort of wrote what was then described as a toolkit. Bizarre. You've had activists who've been picked up, raided for bizarre reasons. Look at the number of NGOs who are under the scanner of the government. This is the big state at work, an Orwellian state, worse still, an autocratic state at times. And I think that story also has to be told. So it's not, as I said, I don't want to, I haven't made even that chapter really about me. I'm part of the chapter, but it's really about telling you what's happening to people in the media, many of whom are far braver than me.
I found it actually very honest. And to be honest with you, I was just thinking if Rajdeep can feel this way. Because if somebody advised you get out of the country or something, and you're just like...
Yeah, get out of the city. I was told go to a non-BJP ruled state.
Yeah, and something similar happened to me when I was working at a social media company, and the first reaction of everyone was get out of the country. And I was like, right. I don't think that's what we should be doing, but you're absolutely right. If you're in a position of privilege and you can deploy your platform to share what's going on, at the same time, I do want to ask you, because it looks like as much as we talk about, civil liberties being eroded, about the ED and other agencies being, weaponized, it's not started with this regime. That's something that, gets pointed out to you time and again. And
absolutely, Amrita, and that's quite true. Look, India didn't become independent in 2014. Indian politics didn't become what it is only in 2014. It has become, perhaps, as I said, more brazen and bruising. It's always existed. It's not as if the Congress didn't misuse the CBI. Of course, the Congress misused agencies. The BJP is doing the same, only more brazenly. Does that mean one is right and the other is wrong? No, both are wrong. And we must have the courage to say it. My problem is that people will read this book and I hope, and pick and choose, cherry pick chapters. Please don't do that. For me, I want to show the mirror to all of them. I want to show the mirror to the ruling party. I want to show the mirror to the opposition. So where the opposition's got it wrong, I say that. And where the government's got it wrong, I say that. I am not here in this book to take sides. I am here to tell a story which I think must be told. Because Indians must know what is happening around them without fear or favor.
So coming back to a little bit of the fear and favor, because the media has been, we've had so many phrases about the media. It's one of the best professions. I still miss journalism. And I think I miss journalism because you get to meet amazing people every day of the job, right? What started happening, though, is you only see one side of the story, as you were saying. There's also this issue that if people are worried about what they're going to say, and I do want to ask you, at any point when you were writing this, did you have to stop and think, this is going to get me in trouble?
That's a good question. I do think so. As I said, there have been moments when I've thought to myself, how far can I go in pushing the envelope? Do I say this or not? Will it how will the person who I'm writing about respond? And then I thought to myself, when you're writing a book, you have to be as honest as possible to yourself, but more importantly to the reader. The reader must know why he or she is reading this book. And I hope that, that comes across. That I'm putting it out there. Out of the 3 books that I've written, Amrita, I'll be honest, this I think is the most brutally frank that I've been. Because I think as you get older, maybe you get braver. You perhaps feel that if I don't do it now, who knows, 5 years later, I won't be around to write a 4th book. So you just want to put it out there, tell the story, and hope that that readers will respect the fact that you're trying to be as honest with them as possible.
And when you talk about, taking stock of where you are, let's see, you've seen so many changes in India, you've seen so many changes even in the media, right? I mean, going from print to TV, to 24/7 news, to being on call constantly on digital. How do you look at or do you ever have thoughts about what you hope your impact or legacy will be?
No. I'm, maybe in some moment of weakness, we all think of, how will the world look at us? But as I get older, I increasingly believe that you've got to wrestle with your own conscience. It's not about how people judge you. How will you judge yourself? Will you judge yourself as someone who retained at least part of his spine? I'm not saying the whole spine, at least part of his spine, when around you, lots of people who you were friends or thought you admired were crumbling. So I think I don't look at legacy building, but I certainly am conscious of the fact that I'm at a stage in my career where I need to be true to myself above all else. This book is Rajdeep Sardesai trying to be as true to himself as a political journalist can be.
As we wind down this chat for the moment, Rajdeep, and I have so many questions for you, I could go on for hours, but when you look at younger journalists coming in today, do you have any advice for them? Because they're coming into a system that's so different from what we saw even 20 years ago.
The younger generation is both the lucky and the unlucky generation. The younger generation of journalists do not have the benefit of something that I had when I started off, which was mentoring, from the likes of Prannoy Roy and Radhika Roy when I was in TV, from the likes of Dilip Padgaonkar and Daryl De Monte when I was in print, R.K. Lakshman. It was privileged to sit in a room next to R.K. Lakshman daily for my 6 years at the Times of India. So I was privileged to have mentoring and to press the pause button when you were in journalism. Tehrav is a lovely word that the great Gulzar uses. You were not in this rush to be the next Usain Bolt, to be first and fast with the news. So I think that gave you a huge advantage. On the other hand, today's journalists are superbly endowed with technology, with other skills of being truly multimedia, and I envy their skills. And therefore, all I can say is respect your profession and do it with passion. If you want to be a journalist, do it because you're passionate about the process of news. And if that's what drives you, terrific. I know it's not easy to be a journalist today, that because of the intrusive nature of social media and this sort of hydra-headed technological monster that we've created, where everything is in real time. You and I are talking, someone is WhatsApping the conversation, and it then spirals out of control. I think real-time journalism has its problems, but it's still a great place to be. I mean, I've been very privileged to have this ringside view of Indian society and politics for over 3 decades. It's just been a wonderful roller coaster ride, and I've been very privileged. I look back with great fondness at the good memories, and I try and keep away the bad.
Same. I think we learned a lot in the newsroom from you as well, I will say. I do want to say, 2 more questions for you. One is, you talk about social media, you talk about this rise now of the YouTubers, because we're seeing this shift from journalists or editors to influencers, they were called earlier. It seems like a new form of basically op-ed journalism, right? It's opinions. It's not necessarily journalism, but you talk about this. That is the new...
Look, Amrita, world changes, you change with the world. I talk about the Ravish Kumars and the Dhruv Rathis of the world. I think they are important elements they're important figures in the 2024 election. Dhruv Rathi's video that had millions of views. Everyone was sharing it for a while. And at a time when the mainstream media seemed to have a one-sided narrative, I think Dhruv Rathi succeeded almost in giving us an alternative view. It was opinionated, but it was, it was welcome almost. It was refreshing because it was different. And one of the interesting elements that I discovered was Dalit influencers. This whole Samvidhan Khatre Mein Hai was not started by politicians. It was started by Dalit YouTuber, influencers, Instagrammers, call them what you want. And I think that's fantastic. These are the new trends that are being, are out there and need to be talked about and spoken about. That's the fascinating part of the other interesting story for me in the book. Since you spoke about, there's also the old Saurav Ganguly. The way the BJP wooed Saurav Ganguly to get him to almost take on Mamata Banerjee in West Bengal. Again, I think it's a fascinating story. And, I got some insights into exactly what happened. But think about it. The BJP wants India's cricket captain, a former India captain, to stand as a Bengali folk hero against Mamata Banerjee. Again, that might only happen in India, but it's great.
Yeah. Cricket and politics, your two favorites.
Yeah, I must confess, at the end of the day, cricket and politics have kept in my more depressing moments. Cricket and music have kept me going. You listen to Kishore Kumar and you watch, say, a Sachin Tendulkar bat and you're okay. Politics can depress you, but it can also energize you.
Anything that you are reading right now that's or watching or listening to that's inspiring that you'd like to share?
During the period of the book, I read very little. I mean, I wrote this over 18 months. And it's tough to write a book while you're doing full-time journalism. So I'd wake up every morning at 5 a.m. and write, because 5 to 9, 4 hours uninterrupted was the best time I could get. So I had very little time to read. I just read, or I'm reading Sakshi Malik's autobiography, Witness, because it's, again, a woman wrestler talking about her life. And it's interesting that, more and more public figures are willing to talk about their lives so openly. So I found that pretty interesting. I must confess, nothing else comes immediately to mind as a book that I've just read. But I'm looking forward to reading William Dalrymple's new book on the Golden Road. When you're writing a book, you get so caught up in writing your book that you forget that there are thousands of others writing their own books. And I believe everyone has a story in them. You've written books and others have. And all of us have at least one story in our lives that we can tell through a book. And a book, the joy of holding a book in hand beats probably anything else in journalism, apart from the odd live television experience when you see a major politician suddenly being humbled and his face is stone-faced, and he has he doesn't know what's hit him or her. Apart from that, a book has a very special quality to it. Just holding it in your hand makes it very special.
No, congratulations, Rajdeep, on this one. If you have one final message for your viewers or listeners, do you want to share?
What do I tell the readers out there except that please do read this book, if not for any other reason, but to troll me. You want to troll me, the best way to do it is after reading the book. Don't troll me without reading the book. And I hope that you will find it engaging and interesting with lots of stories. I'd like to believe I'm a storyteller. So whether you're a Modi Bhakt or a Rahul Chamcha, or just a ordinary Indian citizen wanting to know more, I think there will be something in the book for all of you.
I love it. Thank you so much, Rajdeep, for coming on Harper Podcast.
Thank you very much, Amrita, and wonderful to be with you in conversation.
If you enjoyed that episode of Harper Podcast, don't forget to listen, subscribe, or give us a rating on Spotify and Hubhopper. You can also subscribe to the Harper Broadcast newsletter to keep up with all the latest.